Hey everyone, welcome back to Reading with Tatiana. Today I'm doing my top 10 books for 2022 that I read, and I was so fortunate because I had the time to read 64 books at the time of this filming. I am participating in Holiday Hackathon from Tangible Reads, so I'll probably finish off with a few more books, but I don't think any of the books on my TBR for the Holiday Hackathon will become top 10. So I'm filming a few days earlier because when the holidays happen, there will be zero time for filming. Before I go into my top 10 list of 2022, I will always appreciate it if you watch my videos to please hit the subscribe button. If you like my content, please give it a thumbs up. And if you have read any of these top 10 books of mine, comment down below what you thought of them. Were they a top 10 for you? And I would love to hear what your top number one book for 2022 is. My top 10 list is in no particular ranking from top to bottom. However, I will say my first book that I'm sharing right now is my top book of the year, and I have been praising about it whenever I've done a booktube tag because if I can recommend it, I will. So my top book for 2022 is Beasts of Little Land by Jae Kim. I love this book. Basically, it starts in 1918 and it's set through several decades up until the Korean independence in the 60s until a few years after. And this is a multi-generational story, and there's love, there's war, there's peace, there's drama, but also just a lot of beautiful nuances in life. One of the quotes in the book, I've actually made it part of my Facebook and my Instagram handle, is life is such a small price to pay for death. I just think this book was so beautiful. Like when it ended, I was just like, oh my God, this part of my life is over and I can't wait until the future when I can reread this book again. I don't want to compare books, obviously, because they're different books, but I think if you were a fan of Pachinko, you will love this book. It's also Jae Kim's debut novel, so please show her some support. It is a great book. My second top 10 book for 2022, again in no particular order because the next few books were all like heavy hitters, is Even After All This Time by Afshineh Latifi. This book is amazing. It's basically a memoir, and we follow Afshineh and her sister. They grew up in Tehran in Iran, and in the 1970s, life was very great, but then very quickly life was going bad, and her parents had to make a difficult decision to send their daughters to America to be raised by an extended family. And this book basically talks about their time in America, being raised by family they haven't met before, and the journey to reunite their parents back to America, and just talking about what it's like to be an immigrant in America. And this book is very heavy, but also has lots of really heartwarming moments. This book was just great. It is an older book, but I think it stands the test of time, and I really recommend this book if you're a huge fan of memoirs and learning about the immigrant experience in America. My next recommendation is Against the Loveless World by Susan Abuala. Basically, we follow a young Palestinian woman and her journey. The book starts with her being in I think, Iraqi prison, and she kind of recounts how her life led her to where she is. This book is really great because it kind of made me more open my mind and my knowledge to this area of the world, like this whole Palestinian, Israel, Middle Eastern region of the world, and how we as a Western society see these countries and its divided borders, but for these people there, it's very blended, and all these borders were put on them by Western forces. And this book is just great because it gives you a lot of empathy and realizations on a lot of these terrorists we deem in the West didn't choose to be terrorists. Something happened in their childhood, like maybe their father was shot by these American soldiers that came way back when, and it really shows there is no good guy, bad guys objectively in this world. They're just people that are just trying to protect and save their home and have a better life for their family. This book is pretty heavy. I really recommend it. It's just so great. My next recommendation is also a Middle Eastern perspective. It's called A Woman Is No Man by Etaf Rum. You can probably see at the beginning of this year I kind of was going through a specific genre of historical fiction set in the Middle East. So this is also a debut novel, and it's freaking amazing. Basically, it's told in an Arab American voice, and it's cool because it's multi-generational. We see perspective from the protagonist, her mother, I believe her grandmother as well, and eventually her own daughter, and just about the idea of being a woman in the Arabic world and what it really means, and how like there's strength, there's resilience, and sometimes there's no voice. And I don't want to spoil it too much, but it's just, if you like multi-generational books, this book is great for you. And it's really cool because it's almost completely set in America. So again, if you're really curious to learn more about the immigrant experience in America and what it's like, this book is for you. My next recommendation, I'm finally changing genres. I would say it's self-help spirituality is living untethered beyond the human predicament by Michael A. Singer. This is actually his second book. I had meant to pick up his first book, but I picked up this book by accident. And this book is great because it's a great reminder to be present. You can only control your present. And this book just came at the right point in my life because for a few years, I have been thinking about how I feel about my consciousness and my purpose as an individual in this universe. And this book talks about a lot about how we connect to each other, how there's this higher being, and it's not really religious based, but just general spiritualism. And so I think if you're someone that's like me, that is agnostic, but doesn't subscribe to a specific religion, this book would be really good for you. And I think it really helps with whenever something annoys or angers you. This book gives you tools to kind of like anchor it back down and just focus on what you can control. My number 6 recommendation is a young adult fiction from a Korean author that was translated into English. Even though it's a young adult's book, I would say it's probably a bit like heavier topic because there is like a bit of gore and violence in it. And this book is My Almond by Son Wonpun. And this book is basically about a teenage boy who grows up and he has a disorder that actually is a real disorder that affects 1 in 10 people, but obviously on the spectrum. And this character has a very extreme case of it where he can't read emotions and he can't express his own emotions or even feel emotions. And the story starts with him witnessing his mom and grandmother being brutally murdered in public by a mass murderer. Because it's set in Korea, the mass murderer isn't a gun wielding murderer, but a knife wielding one. So basically this book talks about how he reacts to seeing his mom and grandmother being murdered and the aftermath of it. And this book is just really good because it kind of goes to show you that, as someone who is neurotypical, speaking for myself, I take things for granted like social cues or etiquette or just conversation. And this book really puts you in the mind of the protagonist and how hard it can be to catch these cues and how, there's lots of things we do by habit in our society that maybe is like weird or abnormal, but we just accept it as is. One thing I really enjoy about this book too is it kind of gave me a lot of empathy for mass murderers, not due to the fact that they've done what they've done, which is awful, but what led them to become who they are. So I really recommend this book if you want to change your perspective. My next recommendation is a non-fiction, and this book I actually gave it a 3 out of 5. However, I'm recommending it because when I went through my 60 something ever books, I wanted to pick books that change my mind or made me think differently, and this book definitely did. This book talks about how food giants like Heinz or Kraft Dinner aren't just making us addicted to junk food because it's convenient and because it tastes good, but also they add chemicals that maybe don't taste good, but they use our biology against us. So for example, they add this additive that doesn't taste like anything, but it has more calories or something like that. So when your body eats it, it feels like it's giving you more nutrition, even though it really isn't. And that's how it grows this addiction. And this book kind of talks about how, especially in America, where obesity is an epidemic, that it's not really the individual's fault because everything around them is making it easy for them to eat unhealthy. It's more cheap to eat unhealthy. It's more convenient. And once you get bigger and bigger, it's not as easy as putting the fork down because you've built all these habits. And even if you unlearn these habits of eating bad food, your body's biology has already changed based on eating all of this processed food. The book does read like a textbook though, so I would say you have to be in the mindset to read it, or you can read it in a conjunction with a fiction book at the same time. I really hope Netflix picks it up and does a docuseries because I think a lot of the information from this book is super eye-opening for me and I really enjoyed it. The next book on my recommended list for my top 10 for 2022 is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. You probably heard her name before. Back in 2015, she was sexually assaulted in Stanford, and she had a very public court case against Brock Turner. And because of her story and her court case, it changed what assault means in the state of California. And also it allowed lots of women or victims, not always women, to come out and realize how important it is to show your voice and take the sexual assaulter to court. And it's not as easy as, oh, I was drunk, it's my fault. This book was great because it was her first time sharing her story with her name and being honest. And it's not just about sexual assault, but also about how awful our court case system is and how they really break down everything you did. And even as a victim, you already feel bad about being assaulted, but you even feel worse because you don't remember every detail. And if you don't, it's kind of like your fault. And this book was just really great. I feel like it's an important read for every woman and man to read, just to know the idea of what assault is, what consent is, and how our court system runs. It's a great book, but it's pretty heavy. My ninth recommendation is The Tattooist of Auschwitz by Heather Morris. This is also, I guess, a nonfiction, but people will argue that maybe there were some parts that are fictionalized. But basically, Heather Morris, the author, who is a New Zealander, had the opportunity to interview someone who was actually the Tattooist of Auschwitz. And what the Tattooist was basically at this concentration camp, when you come in, he would tattoo a number on your wrist to indicate what number prisoner you are. And he is Jewish, but he was given this, job assignment. And this book is pretty dark because it talks about all the horrors that happened in the concentration camps and, all the shit that happens that's honestly awful. But somehow in this concentration camp, there's still signs of hope and people coming together to try to help each other and support each other, and how he, as a tattooist, used his job privilege to help others. This book, I think everyone should read. I feel it should be part of high school curriculum, especially as we still teach World War II. It's just a great book. And my last recommendation, this book was also not a 5 out of 5 for me, but when I went through my books I've read this year, I just want to share this one because I just really love, again, how it kind of opened my mind in some ways. And you'll probably laugh for watching this because obviously if you read sci-fi or fantasy, that happens to you all the time. But I'm not an avid sci-fi or fantasy reader. So this book is They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. I really enjoyed this book because basically it talks about what you would do, or it follows two characters where basically you get a call and at the stroke of midnight or something, and a call tells you that you're going to die today. It doesn't tell you what time or how, but that by the end of the day, you'll be dead. So this book talks about this future, I guess, parallel world where this is something that happens, and how you choose to live the last few hours or last full day of your life. And I just really love the world that Adam Silvera painted. It was also I think one of my first queer books, and I really enjoyed that. And also I feel as a book by itself, it's like a standard book, but I really like the world that he created. I'm really happy to hear that was picked up to be a TV series, and it'd be cool to see how it fleshes out and to see more of this world. That is my top 10 for 2022. Thank you for watching until the end. Let me know if any of these books also hit your top 10, or if you have any recommendations for me, because I would love to hear what your top number one book is for 2022 if you only could recommend me one book. Thanks for watching until the end, and I'll see you guys in the new year, or maybe I'll post this in the new year. We'll see. Bye.